Okay, Marco. One thing I wanted to ask you is what is happening with Trump brand in New York?
In New York specifically?
Yeah.
Well, we're well known to be a democratic state. I think the sentiment towards his politics has been very clear in all blue states. And as a result, it has really caused a little bit of damage to his brand.
How tainted is the brand in New York?
It's hard to measure. You hear on the streets that they are losing money, that they're closing shops, that they're not able to do their own businesses, but the numbers speak differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
From having researched and read about their financials, they actually have been doing really well. So it's how tainted. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. On the other end, what is affecting them is the social media, and that's a clear sign that the corporate strategy should be changed.
Mm-hmm. You said that they're doing really well. They're doing well with their own property, right? Like Trump Tower International, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But how about all those properties that had Trump's name on them, and they actually had to take the name down? I'm talking about, good example here is Soho Trump, the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the condominiums on West Side.
Trump places.
Trump places.
Sure.
Yeah. What is this? Is this an indication of something?
I don't, listen, politics is a cycle, just like the economics of any administration or any country, right? So I think it's a period of that, and people are just kind of overblowing it. Brands, when you're using your surname as a brand, look at fashion, look at the automobile sector, look at other families that were very wealthy and political in the US, like the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. There were brands or surnames of families that had also made scandals in the US. President Clinton with the whole Lewinsky scandal. His Clinton Foundation didn't get affected. As a matter of fact, it did much better.
Yeah, but Clinton doesn't own skyscrapers anywhere or hotels.
Right.
And he is not a businessman. And you mentioned Rockefeller. We're sitting in Rockefeller Center. No one is going to rename this.
Perhaps that was the brand strategy and management that they should have taken, as opposed to just concentrating in the hospitality sector or residential buildings. Create landmarks that carry on your name for a longer period of time, right? Like you mentioned, the Rockefeller Plaza, nobody's going to rename, but we all know the history of the Rockefellers, of how they monopolized, how they created trust actions, and they actually created antitrust laws because of that, to avoid the monopolies in the world. I mean, that was one of the biggest histories of how money was being amounted in these countries, right? The Carnegies and the Vanderbilts versus the Rockefellers of the time. Did that affect their name? No. To this day, people look at this name as the biggest emblems of capitalism. Trump is a product of that, right? I think the fact that his politics and his announcements on social media tend to be very right-sided, it has made, in a blue state like New York, a very sensitive environment. But I think it's a cyclical thing. I don't think it's something that's going to affect him for life. I think his children, which all of them have MBAs, should come up with a corporate strategy that will help them get out of that hole.
Well, but Ivanka pretty much lost her brand through this for now. I'm only saying this because you mentioned the children.
Sure.
President's daughter, Ivanka Trump, she pretty much lost her business, right? Her brand.
She was an entrepreneur. Like any other startup or entrepreneurial venture, there's the risk of losing your business. Is it necessarily attached to the fact that her father is the president of the United States? It's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. It could have been, because she has nothing to do with that, right? Today she's an advisor to him, and even that is becoming controversial. So I wouldn't really pin that it had to do it was a direct connect to his name and all.
So the interesting strategy one could point to is the way Trump organization approached the other property, the skating rink in Central Park. They simply shrunk the logo
Yeah.
to annoy people a little less, I guess. Do you think this is the kind of thing they should have probably done with other properties of Trump Organization in New York?
Now, brand strategy is not about just the logo. I think that's more of a, here I am, look at me. Shrinking may have helped, but it's such a tourist attraction that I don't think anybody's going to stop going to it. His own building where he resides, if you walk by it, you'll see hundreds of people every day taking pictures in front of it. Is that a good sign or is that a bad sign, right? So hard to measure. I think what makes the big difference today to what it used to be for the big families, the Kennedys, everybody knows were involved in bootlegging in the US. Yet, you have an airport, you have schools, you have military bases.
It's not named after bootlegger, it's named after one of the best presidents of the United States.
Yes, but we're talking about branding. We're talking about the surname, the last name here, right? So the name is Trump, the surname, right?
Yeah.
And it's affecting their children, you're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm just going in retrospect to show you that sometimes that's not the correlation. Just like you said yourself, there's Kennedy Airport, there's all sorts of different landmarks and military bases named after presidents. I wouldn't be surprised that in 10 years from now, you'll have a military base or a school named after the Trumps. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be a bad thing. It's just part of the history. Do we have bad and good presidents? I think everyone does, but it's a matter of perception. If Obama today had done a business of similar scales where his name was in front of a building, half of the population in the US will not like it either because the country is clearly divided. So this is more of a biased perception than it's really what he's doing. So we're looking at it from one side, and I think we should look at the panoramic view.
Does this explain the president's decision to make his permanent residency now in Florida rather than New York?
I was reading about that, right? I was reading that it had to do with the taxes. Listen, I'm a New Yorker. I moved out to Long Island because of the same reasons, right? The taxes here are extremely high. My children all go to private schools, so you have to evaluate, what do I do? Clearly, his wealth in comparison in New York State is gonna feel that. Because if we start losing our billionaires or millionaires or that kind of presence here, it could affect our economy, which means schools are not gonna have enough money for, and that's already an issue, to have better teachers, better food quality, which by the way is a big, big issue here. All of our public school systems, jails and hospitals get the same food from the same source. Doesn't that sound a little weird? That our children are eating the same food that a person in jail is consuming, that a sick person in a hospital is? I'm not being, controversial here. I just try to point out the facts. And people should really look at that before making adversive comments.
All right, so you think that whatever happens to Trump, I'm just kind of like summarizing our conversation, whatever happens to Trump's brand in New York now is not necessarily what we'll be talking about in a few years.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the corporate strategy that I think his company is probably already doing, like shrinking the logo, not being too public to the eye, it's a good move. And now it's all about communications, communicating to the people the right message, right? Creating a foundation, being a social landmark to the people, the domestic people here, but also the foreigners that come and travel to be here and see what is exactly going on. The perception that Europe, Asia, or any other country in the world has of the US is not the same that you living here would have. And I think that perception could be fixed with communication. So social media is a big aspect of that. The fact that families in the past that amounted to so much money and wealth did not get bullied by social media is because the technology did not exist. Today, we do need to be careful with that. And we've seen plenty of cases where that comes up. In the fashion world too, right? Tommy Hilfiger would say something wrong. Guess what? The rappers or the musicians will not embrace that brand, and there goes his brand. So there are different mechanisms and different ways of communicating to your consumers and everybody who's looking at that consumption sector or growth sector so that they like you. Can you please everyone in the world? Absolutely not. I have a home, I have a wife, I have kids. Do I please them every day? Absolutely not. There are times when they don't like me, and that's okay. That's part of life.
Mhm.
Now imagine being the president of this country.
I don't want. All right, thank you very much, Marco.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.